This lesson is over perimeter and area. The objective students to be able to find the area of the perimeter of a square, triangle, and rectangle, and the circumference and area of a circle. So let's say circle. I should probably go correct that. So first, just to go over the formulas. For a square, all the side lengths are the same, so we call that S. So the perimeter, you just multiply the side length by 4, so 4S. And the area, all you have to do is take that side length squared. That's why they call it squared. For a triangle, A, B, and C are all side lengths, and then H is the height. Now, if it's a right triangle that looks like this, then this side can also be the height, because that's how tall your triangle is. But it's not always like that. So you guys hopefully know this. The perimeter is A plus B plus C, all the sides added together, and then the area is 1/2 base times height. Now, for a rectangle or a parallelogram, I'm using B as the base, H is the height. So the perimeter is 2 times the base plus 2 times the height, and the area is base times height. Now, the other way you've seen this is you also have seen the length and width, 2 times the length plus 2 times the width, and the area is length times width. It's the same thing. The only reason I use base and height is because that's the same for a parallelogram. But I'm going to use base and height, but length and width is just about the same. And also keep in mind, when I go back to the square, S squared, this is, you could call this rectangle base times height. That's S times S. S times S is S squared. So that's all the same with that one. And for a circle, R is the radius, D is the diameter. To find the circumference, it's 2 pi, 2 times pi times R. And for the diameter, it's pi times D. And the area is pi R squared. Pi times the radius squared. I need to fix that. I personally am going to tell you guys to do this. Some other teachers do it differently, but I always want you to use the pi button. If you just use 3.14, I don't think it's as accurate. It's not as accurate, and I don't really like it. Plus, if you know where the pi button is, it's just one button rather than 3.14 is 4 buttons. So I think that should also help. The other thing I will tell you is most of the time I use this formula for the circumference just because the radius is usually it's used in the area and the circumference, but you can also use the diameter. It doesn't make any difference. Remember, the diameter is all the way across. The radius is just from the center to the outside. Now, the other thing I want to tell you, with perimeter, you can always just add all the sides together. So if we go back to the rectangle, if this side is the base and this side is also, they're equal, so they're both B, and this side is H. If we take B plus H plus B plus H, if we simplify that, that's where they get the 2B plus 2H. So if you just add all the sides together, that's the perimeter, and that's on everything. The only thing you can't really do that with is a circle because it doesn't really have sides. So use the formula to find the perimeter or the circumference. If necessary, round to 2 decimal places and put it in terms of pi. So in terms of pi, something a little bit new. We'll get to that once we get to the circle. So this first one's a rectangle. So for the perimeter, it's 2 times the base plus 2 times the height. But again, if I were you, I would just add these together. So that's what I'm going to do instead. 8 plus 10 plus 8 plus 10. It's a little bit more work and it's a little bit more writing down, but it's nice because it's always the same. So 8 plus 10 plus 8 plus 10 is 36. That's the perimeter. Technically, it'd be 36 kilometers, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. And the area is base times height. So the base is 8 and the height is 10. And you might say, well, what if it was the other way around? It doesn't matter if the 10 is the base and the 8 is the height. It doesn't make any difference. So that's 80. And then technically, that's kilometers squared. Now, what's with the kilometers squared? I'm not going to expect you to do this. I just want to make sure I say this because it's there. But the area is always squared. And the reason is, technically, 8 is kilometers, 10 is kilometers. So when I multiply kilometers and kilometers, I get kilometers squared. Whereas with your perimeter, these are all kilometers. But when you add kilometers together, when you add them, you don't get squared. So again, that's just a little extra. You don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to hold you to that. So this one's a square. Again, personally, I always just do the same thing as a rectangle. So it's 12. The perimeter is 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12. Now that one, some of you guys are going to be quick enough to realize that's 4 times 12 once you write it down. So that's 48. And the area, again, personally, I would just do base times height if I were you. Again, you could do the side length squared. It's all the same, 12 times 12. But this is just less to remember in my opinion. So for a triangle, we have all the sides added together, 8 plus 7 plus 8. Put that in your calculator, 8 plus 7 plus 8, 23. And the area is 1/2 base times height. There's a couple other ways to write that, but I would say the base is 8, and the height is 6.3, it looks. So for the 1/2, I just put in 0.5 in my calculator. I think that's easier. That gives me 25.2. Again, technically that would be meters squared, but I'm not going to worry about that. So same thing with this one. 9 plus 5 plus 9 is the perimeter, 23. And for the area, it is 1/2 the base. Whoops. The base is 9, and the height is 4.8. So 0.5 times 9 times 4.8 is 21.6. Now, one really interesting fun fact that I can say really quick, a rectangle, the area is just base times height. For a triangle, it is 1/2 base times height. And the reason is because if you look at a rectangle, it's your base and this is your height. Well, to make a triangle base times height, you just literally cut it in half, and so it's half of that, and that's where that comes from. Again, you don't need to know that at all. I just wanted to say that if it helps you remember. So just a side note before we do the next ones. If I tell you to leave something in terms of pi, what that means is in your answer, you're going to have the pi symbol. And really all it is you don't have to multiply by 3.14 at the end. It's just going to save you a little bit of time. So for instance, you do the same thing like we have 3 times 5 times x. We say that's 15x. Same thing, if we have 3 times 5 times pi, we're just going to call that 15 pi. That is your answer, and that's leaving it in the terms of pi. Now again, if you're finding the decimal answer, you just multiply 15 times pi. So the decimal answer is 47.1238898. Round to 2 decimal places, please, if you do that. But if you leave it in terms of pi, you just have to put 15 pi. Now, I don't know if this is ever going to come up in this chapter, but if we have 3 plus 5x, we can't combine those because they're not like terms. Same thing with this. If we have 3 plus 5 pi, we can't combine those. We can only combine these because they're multiplying. These are adding, so we can't combine those. Again, I don't know if it's ever going to come up, but that's what I mean when I say leave it in terms of pi. So for these, I'm going to do it both ways, leaving it in terms of pi and finding the decimals, so you guys have the difference for that. So the circumference, this one gives you the radius, and so I'm going to use the 2 pi r. So that's 2 times pi times the radius is 11. So 2 times 11 is 22. So if you just leave it as 22 pi, that's the answer in terms of pi. Now, if you want to leave it as a decimal, you type in either 22 pi or 2 times pi times 11. You should be getting 69.11. Oh, sorry, 12. Again, please round to 2 decimal places. So it's 69.12. Again, those numbers are the exact same. The first one is leaving it in terms of pi, and it's actually easier once you get the hang of it.
Any staff member that ordered no chicken, it is down right outside the main office. Please come and get it.
So the area is pi r squared, so we have pi times 11 squared. So 11 squared is 121. So a 121 times pi is the answer in terms of pi. Again, I usually put the pi, most people put the pi at the end if they do it that way, so I would encourage you to do that. But 11 times pi It is, as a decimal, 380.1327111. And so this one is, that stays 0.13. Same thing with this one, circumference 2 times pi times the radius. So it's 2 times pi times the radius is 6. Also, again, the order doesn't matter with this one. I think I maybe should write it 2r times pi. Doesn't really make a difference, though. So 2 times 6 is 12, so that's 12 pi. That's in terms of pi. Again, that's why that's pretty nice. But then as a decimal, 12 pi is 37.69911. That 9 rounds that up, but there's nowhere for it to go. It's already a 9, so it's got to round the 6 up, so it's 70. Again, technically, those would be meters. And then the area is pi times r squared, which is pi times 6 squared. This one you can do in your head. 6 squared is 36. That's just 36 pi. And again, that's why that's really nice, because you can kind of do it in your head. Again, that's meters squared. But then 36 times pi, you can't really do in your head. You have to use your calculator. 113.0973. That 7 rounds that 9 up, so that is 0.10. So let's talk about the difference between perimeter and area. So the biggest thing is perimeter goes around the edge of something. The area is what takes up the whole space. So for instance, wallpaper for your bedroom. So if you're doing wallpaper on your bedroom, you're not just going to do around the sides. It's going to take up the whole wall. So that's going to be the area. It takes up that whole area, if you will. Crown molding for the ceiling. So crown molding is, if you look on your ceiling, it goes around to the top edges. If it goes around the top edges, it doesn't take up all the space. It doesn't cover the whole wall or the whole ceiling. That's perimeter. Spelled wrong. Fencing for your backyard. We just did an activity with this. That's perimeter, because it goes just around the outside. The grass of your backyard would be the area. That's what fills everything else in. It doesn't go around the outside. Paint for your basement floor. It goes across the whole floor, not just the outside, so that is area. Couple word problems here. I would definitely draw pictures if you need to. A rectangle measures 25 by 10 centimeters. We have a rectangle. It is 25 by 10. Doesn't have to be drawn to scale. What is the area? So we're only asking for the area for this. That's base times height. 25 times 10. Doesn't matter which is which, really. And so that ends up being 250. And again, technically, that's 250 centimeters. But I'm not going to be worried about that. In Canvas, I'm going to put that part for you. Parallelogram has a base of 3 and a height of 7. So we'll look into little parallelograms a little bit more. Basically, a parallelogram is if you took a rectangle and you just hit this top part a little bit so it skewed it over. So parallelograms means that the top and bottom are parallel and the sides are parallel. So the base is 3, and then the height is where you go straight up and down. The height is 7. So it's the same thing. That's the good news. Base times height is 3 times 7. That's 21 inches. So obviously today's lesson is plugging a lot of things into formulas. So it shouldn't be that bad. You have the formulas, just make sure you're doing that. Find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 7. The circumference is 2 times the radius, or 2 times pi times the radius. Again, the other thing you can do with circumference is you could find the diameter. If the radius is 7, the diameter is 14. And then you could use the diameter plus pi, or the diameter times pi. If you want to do it that way, that would work. Again, I tend to stick to the radius because that's what I like. So 2 times 7 times pi is 14 pi. It doesn't say whether to leave it in terms of pi or not, so I would say it's up to you. I'm going to do both just for an example. But if it doesn't tell you, you can decide. But again, I'm probably going to tell you on a test or a quiz just to make sure. 43.98 when you round. Always round to 2 decimal places. Unless I tell you to, I want 2 decimal places. What's the perimeter of a square that has a side length of 2.5? So again, the perimeter, that means these are all 2.5. So this is where if you add all those together, you can, but you guys probably have done this long enough or you know enough about multiplication that that's just 4 times 2.5. And again, that's the formula I gave you before. But like I told you, I usually add all the sides together just to make it a little bit so it's more universal. But again, if you realize that, that's a little bit of a quicker way to do it. So this is working backwards. So rather than finding the area or the perimeter, now they're gonna give you the area or perimeter. You're gonna find something else. We're gonna find the width with this one. So we have a rectangle. The rectangle has a length of 12. We don't know the width. And again, now we're using length and width instead of base and height. It's the same thing. Don't worry about it. But I know the area is 96. Now again, this is why I told you about the centimeter squared. It tells you that, and I've had people get confused with that. Just look at the 96. So the area is the base times the height, so the length times the width. So that is 12 times W, and that's equal to 96. Whatever that W is, whatever that width is 96. So to solve this, just divide both sides by 12. 96 divided by 12 is 8. So that's what we have for the width. Find the area of a square whose perimeter is 48. So the perimeter is 48, but we just did this. The perimeter is the side length times 4. So 4s is equal to 48. Divide both sides by 4. That means your side length is 12. Find the height of the triangle if the base is 10 and the area is 25. So the base is 10. We don't know what this height is, but we know the area is 25. So area is 1/2 base times height. So the area is 25 equals 1/2. The base is 10. We don't know what the height is. So there's a couple ways to do this. What I would do is I would take 1/2 times 10 right away. The other way to do it is multiply everything by 2 to get rid of that 1/2. The only problem with that is that will give you 50 over here, but then you don't multiply the 10 or the h by 2, and a lot of people get that confused. So if I were you, I would just take 1/2 times 10. Even if it's a decimal, I would just put it as a decimal, but it's 5. Divide both sides by 5. You get your h is equal to 5 for that one. The area of a circular garden is 78.5. Now, one thing, since they give you a decimal instead of putting it in terms of pi, I would just go ahead and leave it as a decimal for your answer. If they put it in terms of pi, then I'd put my answer in terms of pi. So that's one other thing you can look for. But again, if you ever are confused or whatever, you can always ask. I try to be specific. Find the circumference. So the area is 78.5. We want the circumference. So the area is pi r squared. And I know that is 78.5. So first thing we're going to do is divide by pi. 78.5 divided by pi is 24.987326. Now, I know I tell you to round to 2 decimal places. If I were you, I only round the answer to 2 decimal places. I leave this stuff 4, 5, 6 decimals even. The more you go, the more accurate it's going to be. So take the square root of both sides now to get rid of that squared. And now when you take the square root of 24.987326, again, I put a lot of decimals in there, but now it's a pretty exact answer. 4.9987, which actually ends up, I would round that. Again, round to 2 decimal places, now you have your answer. That should be squared. My radius is 5 when you round it. But they don't ask for my radius, they ask for the circumference. So now we have to go and say the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. That's 2 times pi times 5, which is 10 pi. Again, if I were you, since they gave you your lengths as a decimal, I would go ahead and multiply 10 pi. So it's 31.42 when you round. But if you left it as 10 pi, that's fine. Again, especially because I don't specify, I don't tell you, I'll take either answer. But if I do specify, then you definitely need to make sure you're paying attention to that. So again, just real quick, I know I said around to 2 decimal places, but usually when you do that, it's going to help if that's your answer. Everything else, I go to at least 3. I usually go to 4 personally because it doesn't take very much work. So the composite figures. Now, composite figures are when you have a shape that's not a regular shape, but we're going to break it down into shapes that we actually know. So find the area of the following shape. Well, I don't have a formula that's like, well, to find stair steps, you use this formula. I don't have that. But I know that these lengths are all the same. So these are all 3. So if you just look at, oh, I guess these are 3 as well. Sorry. So if I just look at this, we have 3, 3, and 3. So that ends up 9. So this side is 9. And then we have 3, 3, and 3. So this side is 9. So I know all my sides here. But how do we find the area? Well, there's a couple different ways to do this. If I were you, I would break this down. You can kind of decide. I personally would break it down. Let's see. Let's do this one big square here. So 3 times 3 is 9. So that's the area of this one. 3 times 3 is 9. So I have those 2 9s. And then the area of this big one in the middle, again, this ends up being 3. So this side is 6 here. This is 3 and 6. So 6 times 6 is 36. So that's the area of that small one. And then we add all those pieces together. Now, it wouldn't be a bad idea not to like totally restart on you. That's a general idea. Another way you could do it is break it up into, this is 3 by 3, so that's 9. This one is going to be a 3 by 3. Whoops. So this one's 9 as well. That makes this a 3 by 3. 3 by 3 is 9, this 3 by 3 is 9, this 3 by 3 is 9, and then add all those together. So basically, again, you're finding the area of different ones we know, and then we're putting them all together. If you want to do it another way, that's fine. There's several different ways. You could say this is 3 by 9, so this one's 27. This is 3 by 6, so that's 18. This is 3 by 3, so that's 9. There's several different ways you can do this. Just try to stay organized. If you need to use different colors, that's fine. But then add these together. So we have 27 plus 18 plus 9. And again, we're adding them because this is the area of the first part, area of the second part, area of the third part. So the area of the whole thing is adding those together. So that's 54. So again, if you want to rewind and look at all the other ways we did it, they're all going to give you 54. Now, the one on your test looks very similar to this, and this is where you have to make sure you're paying attention because it looks like they give us all the lengths, but they kind of don't, but we can figure out everything we need with this. So again, there's several different ways to do this one. The biggest hassle right here is that we have this slope right here. It's kind of at an angle, and so we're going to have to use a triangle or something to do with that. So let's make this into a triangle because I know the area of a triangle. I can find that. Well, then the problem is I don't know what this length is. Well, we're going to be able to use some of our math to figure it out. So the way we do that is if you look at this side is 4. So up here, we just made a magical line here. This would be 4 right here. Well, if this whole length is 10 and this part is 4, that means this other part has to be 6, which means this bottom part has to be 6. Well, if that whole length is 13 and this part is 6, that means this bottom part is 7. And so that's how you can find the base of that. So we found that base is 7. But how do we find the height? Well, again, we can use some of the stuff that we know. I know that this side is 8. This whole side is 15. Well, if this side is 8, this side has to be 7. So that's got to be 7 as well. And so now I can find the area of that triangle. So the area of the triangle is 1/2 base times height. That's 1/2 7 times 7. 0.5 times 7 times 7 is 24.5. So that triangle is 24.5. Now, everything else is rectangles. And so, again, it all depends on how you want to do this. There's several different ways. I know this side is 6. This side is 7. So that multiplied is 42. I would then use the whole rest of it in one big triangle, or one big rectangle. So we have 4 and 15. That whole side is 15. So 4 times 15 is 60. So we have 60 is the big rectangle, this part. 42 is this other little rectangle here. And 24.5 is the triangle here. So 60 plus 42 plus 24.5 is 126.5. Again, you're finding the area to each one of those little sections. Now, we'll learn the area of a trapezoid. So there's a couple other ways you can do this, where instead of looking at the triangle, you'll get a trapezoid. You could have, I know this looks like a mess. You could have found your triangle here and then made this your big rectangle this way. So we have this big rectangle and this smaller one. Do it several different ways if you want, because you can see that it's going to get you the same answer. Now, the other one is kind of the opposite, where instead of putting things together, we're taking things out. So find the area of the shaded region. We can find the area of the shaded region by find the area of the bigger shape, find the area of the smaller shape, and then you subtract them. So the shaded area is this whole thing minus that little hole in the middle. So really, we're going to find the area of this, and then we're going to subtract this little area in the middle. So to stay organized, I like to do this way. This is my big shape. So the area of the big shape, it's just a rectangle, so it's 12 times 8. That's 96. Then the area of the small part is 4 and 4. So that's 16. So the big area is 96. That's the whole thing, including that hole. But then I want to subtract out that hole, which is 16. So 96 minus 16. That is 80. Now, it's kind of the same thing we were doing before, except for instead of adding, we're subtracting. We're taking a part out. And you can do that if you'd rather stay organized like that with this last one we did. You could say this is the area of the triangle, and then find that. This is the area of the first rectangle. This is the area of the second rectangle, and then add all those together. If you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. I find that students don't have as much of a problem with these as they do with these, and so that's why I say to stay a little bit more organized. So the last one, we have a CD here. So we have a circle with a smaller circle in the middle. Notice that this is the diameter. It goes from here to here. And this is the diameter. It goes all the way across. So again, I'm going to find the bigger area. So that is pi times radius squared. Now again, if that whole diameter is 120, the radius is half of that. So the radius is 60. So it's pi times 60 squared. If I were you, I would leave it in terms of pi for right now. That's going to make life easier. Oops.
Lydia Oliveira, dial 2454, please. Dial 2454.
So that's the big shape. And again, if you want to multiply this out, you can. I just think it's going to be a little bit easier if we wait. And the smaller one is pi r squared, and the r for that one is 25. Again, it's half of that. So it's pi times 25 squared. 25 squared is 625, so 625 pi. Now, earlier I told you that if I go way back here, let's see if I can do it real quick, because I don't want to waste any of your time. I said if you add these, you can't actually add these together because they're not like terms, just like 3 plus 5x you can't. But if it was 3x plus 5x, you could put those together. That's 8x. Same thing here. If it's 3 pi plus 5 pi, that's the same as 8 pi. So that's what we have here. There we go. So we need to subtract these. So we have 3600 pi minus 625 pi. And that's why I said if you leave them in terms of pi, it's actually going to be a little bit easier. So 3600 pi minus 625 pi. And I just type it in exactly that way using the pi button. I guess I should say there's two different ways. Sorry. You could just type it in. 3600 minus 625 is 2975 pi, if you want to do it that way. Or you can type it in, like I said, 3600 and then the pi symbol minus 625, then the pi symbol. gives you 9346.238144. Round to 2 decimal places. That ends up being your answer. Now again, I don't tell you to leave it in terms of pi or in a decimal, so it doesn't make any difference which way you do it. On a test, you have to make sure you're paying attention, because a lot of times I will say leave it in terms of pi, or I will specify to leave it as a decimal, or both. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me.